Just thought I'd show it off. Enjoy the video.
That's the power of love. Great Scots Thinker. Or Great Scots Meyer, for any of you long-time fans. What did I tell you? 88 miles per hour! Wait a minute, Doc. You're telling me that you made a time machine out of a DeLorean? Hello, anybody home? Nobody calls me chicken. Tonight, we're sending you back to the future! In celebration of the 40th anniversary of this franchise, we're going to talk about the Back to the Future Trilogy. Possibly one of the greatest movie trilogies ever created. It's an absolute recommendation on my end, even with the distracting elements that come along the way with these particular movies, but I would recommend them nonetheless. I think it's purely because the first film particularly is a masterpiece. And whilst the other two movies may not quite reach the peak of the first film, they are nevertheless still worthy watches. So the premise of the first Back to the Future movie. No doubt the majority of you have already seen the Back to the Future movies, but for the sake of presentation, and in case you don't really know the premise, I'll describe the premise of the first movie to you. The year is 1985 in a fictional town in North America. And we follow the adventure of Marty McFly, a high school student who is the cool kid of the school, who really likes skateboarding, rock and roll, and his girlfriend. You've earned it, mate. Whenever he's not having problems relating to school and his struggling family life, he is an apprentice to his eccentric scientist friend, Doc Emmett Brown. One night, Doc Emmett Brown urgently summons Marty McFly to get the recording gear so that he can showcase his recent scientific breakthrough at the Twin Pines Mall car park. Once there, much to both of their amazement, Doc Brown showcases successfully that he's managed to make a time machine out of a DeLorean sports car that can travel through time with its inbuilt flux capacitor and typed in dates with plutonium fuel once it drives at 88 miles per hour. Look at it. Look at it. It's got the hoverboard. And of course, the flux capacitor. Unfortunately for the two of them, Doc Brown had to make shady deals with terrorists in order to gain access to the plutonium fuel. And wouldn't you know it, much to their dismay, terrorists come along and shoot Doc Brown to pass on. Marty McFly finds himself having no choice but to immediately scramble into the car that doesn't have enough plutonium and accidentally travel back in time to the 1950s to when his parents were teenagers. Not only does he notice the drastic change in scenery, but he accidentally interferes with the space-time continuum, or the order of chronological events, so that he accidentally has his own mum fancy him. Which, of course, is creating a time paradox threatening his own existence and the existence of his siblings. Not good! Marty meets the Doc Brown of the past and explains what's going on. And he observes that even if he does fix the time paradox he's unintentionally made, he doesn't have enough plutonium in his DeLorean time machine to get back to 1985. Fortunately, Doc Brown observes from Marty McFly that in a few days from now, there's going to be this critical historical event in the town that they live in which lightning strikes the clock tower, rendering it malfunctioning and useless. Doc Brown has an idea. Connect the electricity from the lightning to the DeLorean so that it will have enough power to send Marty, say it with me everybody, back to the future! And from there, everything else is just, this movie's just brilliant. The adventure is brilliant. The interactions are brilliant. The acting is brilliant. The casting is brilliant. The music is awesome. Gotta love the 80s. The sheer attention to detail is masterfully done. Although if I did have any particular nitpicks with the first film, I know it's played off as a joke that Doc Brown seems to have always looked like an old man or Elder Man from the 50s all the way to the 80s. But at the same time, do you think you could have made the past Doc Brown's hair just subtly grey, just to emphasize the fact that it's the past Doc Brown? I mean, some people might be a bit confused in that regard. But honestly, stuff like that is just a nitpick in what is otherwise an excellent movie, or at least a nitpick by comparison, if you get what I mean. There's some great set pieces and some brilliantly intense scenarios, especially the scene where Marty is trying to get back to the future. It's Murphy's Law at play. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. All right, I'm getting the DeLorean started. Time to start the car. Oh no, not now. Come on, start the car. Because he needs to start the car in order to drive to the wire on time. And then Doc Brown's equipment keeps getting knocked down again. Like, all right, get this together. Plug. Ah! And here I am just going, oh no, come on, get it fixed. It's such a brilliant scene. I don't know if there's anything more I can say about it. It's just an overall awesome movie. And I would rate the first Back to the Future film an 11.9 out of 12. It is just masterfully done. Fun fact, the DeLorean time machine car was originally going to be a fridge. Yeah, it probably just wouldn't have been the same if they'd gone through with that idea, would it? But anyway, the Back to the Future film is just absolutely brilliant, brilliantly humorous, brilliant spectacle, and overall brilliant attention to detail when it comes to setup and payoff, and foreshadowing and consequences. Great introduction, just overall great. One of my favorite films ever made. Now, the other two movies don't quite reach the same high bar as the first film, but they're still nevertheless worth watching. Back to the Future Part 2 sees Marty McFly work together with Doc Brown, as well as Marty's girlfriend, in whatever way she can, I guess, to travel to the year 2015 to settle some problem with Marty McFly's family, because Marty and his girlfriend have children in the future. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. There are some things that the Back to the Future Part 2 movie got right, and other things it got wrong. One could speculate that Doc Brown played a pivotal role in advancing the technology of this particular town exclusively. Something I think is really clever about the series in hindsight is the fact that despite the drastic changes in scenery, the entire trilogy is still set in one location, which is just so clever. But anyway, what did the movie get right? Video calls. Spot on. I mean, yeah, it's all retro style, but yeah, still spot on. 3D stuff and holographic gimmicks. Yeah, I think they got that. Hoverboards? Well, we had a hoverboard. It's not quite as cool and stylized as depicted in the movie, but it's something. Rows of hover cars. Not quite. Bars dedicated to the 80s. Oh yeah, would have had that in droves. People in funny clothes. Yeah. But anyway, through a series of events, Biff interferes with this time travel mission and manages to take advantage of Marty McFly's selfishness in taking advantage of this horse rally history book from the future that he would then take back to the past to try to win all the bets. But Biff sabotages that, takes that for himself, and basically becomes the president of the town, causing a distorted, bad future. Sports element. Oh yeah, that's the book that was used to cheat. And here, there's all kinds of interesting time travel scenarios at play here. Marty McFly says, well, can't we just travel to the future and prevent it from happening? And Doc Brown had to explain, no. And I know there's different theories of time travel, but this could be quite interesting and educational for people who aren't familiar with the concept. Doc Brown has to explain, look, if we travel to the future at this specific point now, we would only be traveling forward to Biff's timeline. In order to prevent this time from happening, we have to go back and prevent him from gaining access to doing that. So they managed to do that, and this whole time travel mishmash and stuff like that. Very clever attention to detail, and they managed to see the day. Although there is one major problem I have with the film. By the time they managed to accomplish their goal, Doc Brown seems to fly up with the hover car DeLorean for seemingly no other reason than for part 3 to happen, because then he accidentally gets struck by lightning, causing him to time travel back to the Wild West days. And there's this very clever mechanic where Doc Brown has to send a letter to the future involving getting Marty to find the hidden DeLorean, and teaming up with the past Doc Brown once again, much to the young Doc Brown's frustration, which is quite funny. So, leading to the events of Back to the Future Part 3. So, with Part 2, it is quite, it is a bit convoluted in a way, and quite a bit of a muddle of a plot. And it does get rather silly with that part where Doc Brown flies up for no other reason than to have Part 3 happen. And maybe the whole thing could have been paced a little better. Not to mention, there were some scenes that they removed, and I was like, why did you remove that? There was a scene where old Biff travels back to a certain time, and after getting young Biff to place all those horse racing bets, and you see old Biff going and then there's a deleted scene where he's erased from existence because it's implied that the young Biff would then get far too indulgent in his status of power. But they removed the scene of him fading away from existence in that way, and I just think, why did they remove that scene? That really would have elevated the overall presentation. So for the fact that they removed certain bits that probably would have benefited Part 2 better, as well as having a few bits that were comparatively silly, I would rate Back to the Future Part 2 a 9.9 out of 12. Still worth a watch though. Just keep that in mind. It's just those plot elements that I mentioned are just a bit distracting. But then Part 3 is an improvement. So we get this great adventure in the Wild West, where not only do you get the Wild West scenery, but you also get some really clever premises like Marty meeting his own ancestor, played by himself. Oh yeah, something I forgot to mention. As much as Part 2 did try to make Michael J. Fox look a bit older, you could tell the makeup was a bit tacked on, which is kind of a shame, because around this time period you had expert makeup artists like in Amadeus and Hook and Forrest Gump in the 90s later on, which really nailed the whole aging people up through makeup kind of ordeal, whereas they didn't quite nail it in Back to the Future Part 2. Anyway, going back to Part 3, Marty McFly plays the Irish ancestor who just migrated in. I like the fact that Michael J. Fox was able to portray another role in that way. Very clever attention to detail. And of course, you get presumably Biff's ancestor, who is the main bully, and interesting enough, instead of saying chicken, he says, "What are you, yellow?" And then Marty said, "Nobody calls me yellow." We get some interesting scenarios like Doc Brown falling in love with a woman who was meant to die, and some other funny situations like Doc Brown having such a weak comprehension with alcohol that he basically goes unconscious after one sip of alcohol, which is really funny. And some really genius scenarios like using this Wild West train to push the DeLorean so that it can go fast enough to travel back to the future. A great homage to Fistful of Dollars, although taking on the name Clint Eastwood might cause a bit of historical higgledy-piggledy, but the series isn't taking itself too seriously in that regard. I suppose Clint Eastwood would have been named after this vague hero in that regard. So not only do you get the benefit of having this really cool adventure story, but you also simultaneously get a Wild Western in there too, with the scenery and the action set pieces. And even that one cowboy character who sounds like he's going through puberty backwards, whose voice I think may or may not have been in the Aristocats and in Rango too. I think you know the kind of voice I'm talking about. When someone calls you yellow, they consider you a coward for life. And I like how Part 3 ends. It manages to wrap up the loose ends, and again playing into the whole concept of consequences. And in this case, Marty actually learns not to give in to his arrogant, impulsive side, which prevents him from having this major accident regarding crashing his car, causing this time thingamabobby so that him getting into trouble doesn't happen, and he reunites with Doc Brown, who's managed to establish a family of his own, and just wrapping up the loose ends, and he's going on more adventures with his children, and then there's this brilliant final exchange where Marty says, "Where are you going, Doc? Back to the future?" And then Doc says, "Oh, already been there, my lad." So, as much as I really like part 3, it still hinges on that really silly plot element from part 2 where Doc Brown flies up for no other reason than for the lightning to strike and for part 3 to happen. So I'm gonna rate part 3 an 11 out of 12. So I don't rate it as highly as the first part. I'd say the first film is the strongest of the series, as not only does it provide all the fun that all the films bring along anyway, it's also just the most consistent in regards to its overall plot structure and how characters go about with what they do. I suppose by part 2 we're starting to get a bit by the numbers as well. But honestly, the whole trilogy is worth watching, and I would approve of the entire trilogy as a whole. Just keep that in mind that the other 2 films are not as strong as the first film. I think the first film is just that good of a masterpiece of a film, and it makes the other 2 films worth watching. So, what do you think of the Back to the Future trilogy? Let me know in the comments down below. Is there anything about the Back to the Future movies as movies or as commentaries on different time periods that you want to say? Let me know in the comments down below, and I look forward to conversations regarding this awesome movie trilogy. In the meantime, ScotsThinker signing out. See you in the future.